One thing I do want to stress throughout this entire talk is that you absolutely 100% do not need to migrate to Cloud Firestore if you do not want to. We are not getting rid of real-time database. We are not shutting anything down. We have absolutely no plans to deprecate anything. We consider these products siblings. So if you are happily using real-time database, please continue happily using real-time database. Cloud Firestore does present a lot of advantages, and we see it as a better base to build new features on. So I wouldn't be betting that any crazy new stuff will be coming to real-time database, but it is definitely not going anywhere. The hundreds of millions of people who use it every day would be very upset if we did that. So that's definitely not the plan. So to get started today, we're going to run through the Cloud Firestore Codelab. So everyone can follow along. I will be walking through the Codelab and talking us through it. But if you are not interested in just watching me, we can definitely go ahead and go and do the exact same code as I do it, which my laptop's being a little wacky with this screen. It's breaking my windows. But if you go to codelabs.developers.google.com, we like short domains, that will get you a list of Codelabs. And if you ignore all of these and you just type in Firestore up top here, this is going to get you all of our Firestore Codelabs. Now, this is making my computer very laggy. Come on. Firestore. And we're going to go through the Android one today because we are, of course, at an Android event. Firestore. So to get some concept of who I am talking to, how many of you are experienced Android developers? All right, great. How many of you are experienced Firebase developers? All right, one. Great. That's all right. We're gonna do a lot of really cool stuff. So I will be straight with you and say that I am not the world's greatest Android developer, but I am arguably the world's best Firebase developer. So if your questions are very Android specific, there's a very good chance I won't know the answer. However, if you want to yell out any question about anything about any part of Firebase, I will do my absolute best to answer that. But if you hear me say something silly, like say something wrong about a recycler view, just know in your head that I'm wrong, and it's just because I'm not the greatest Android developer. But that's all right. So once we get our Codelab popped up here, there's about 8 steps we're going to walk through. The very first thing we're going to need to do on our first page, I might even say it on the, this very first page, might say it here, we need to go set up a Firebase project. If you haven't already done that, you can head over to firebase.google.com. Firebase.google.com, and sign up. If you've ever used Google Cloud, you'll find this very familiar. If you have never used Google Cloud, that's absolutely all right. Just go ahead and sign in, and then click this big old Go to Console button. Once we're in the Firebase console, if you have Google Cloud projects, you'll see them available to import. If you don't, that's absolutely all right. You can just hit the Create a New Project button. Because I give a fair number of Firebase talks, I have a fair number of Firebase projects. So today I'm going to be using an existing one I already have, which is this project called Codelab. But you can just go ahead and create a brand new one, call it whatever you want. It does not matter at all. And of course, you can change that later. Your console might also look slightly different than mine. I have opted into this beautiful restyling we launched last week. Yours might be blue on the side, but the tabs on the side are going to be exactly the same. So don't worry if it doesn't line up perfectly. All the buttons and everything we'll be clicking is exactly the same. It's just that I have slightly newer CSS than you. I'll give everybody a minute to catch up. For some context about Firebase, Firebase is Google's mobile developer platform. So if you're building a mobile app and you like Google or you're using our technologies, this is absolutely the way to get started to build a mobile app quicker. So we have about 16 products that come in all sorts of different things. There are analytics, there are things to help you grow your app, things to make money, things to help you with authenticating users, storing data, uploading files, hosting your website. All of these things that basically everyone needs to do, and we pull those together into Firebase. Today we're only going to be talking about a few features, mostly those related to Cloud Firestore. So we will do a little bit of Firebase Authentication, we'll do a fair bit of Cloud Firestore, but we're not really going to touch the rest of it. And that's absolutely okay because Firebase is designed to pick and choose. Obviously, we all hate hitting 64,000 methods in our APKs, so we're going to do our absolute best to not pull in anything extra. So our SDKs are all very modular. You can pick and choose what you want. And in this case, we'll pick and choose just analytics, Cloud Firestore, and authentication. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and base off of a starter project called Friendly Eats. And I'll blow this up just a little bit so we can see it a little better. Also, yes, I work at Google and I'm using Firefox. We can talk about how ironic that is later. This base project has really everything we need. If you've looked through our Codelabs before, you get the general idea that this is 95% of the application, and the only bits that are missing are the Firebase bits. Everything else is ready for us. We have a pretty UI, stuff like that. So we're just going to do the absolute minimum to fill in the Firebase parts of this project. So go ahead, if you haven't already, pull this down, Friendly Eats-Android. I'll go here. I'll head into my, carefully scrolling. Oops, scrolled the wrong direction. Scrolled too big. There we go. All right, we will go into Android Studio projects, as I'm sure you've all seen before. And we will paste in that git clone. If you have any issues with this project at all, the guy who wrote it, his name is Sam Stern. He sits right next to me. And please tell me so I can harass him for doing bad work. But I'm pretty sure it's awesome because Sam is awesome. How many files do I have to click? All right, so we pulled this down. We have a bunch of awesome files you'd expect from an Android project. We've all seen that a million times before. Next, we're going to do just a little bit of configuration in our Firebase project. When we're building an Android app with Firebase, we use this Google services.json. If you've used other Google services, you may have seen this before. This is just how we associate our app with our Firebase project. So we're going to need to go into our Firebase project and hit, again, yours might look slightly different. If it does, find the Add Firebase to your Android app big button. Click that, and it'll ask us for a few details. Some of this is only needed if we're shipping this app, which we're not. So like the SHA-1, that's not important. Some other things like that aren't important. All we need to do is fill in our project name, which is already set in the Codelab as com Google Firebase examples.fireeats. So paste that in. We'll call it some name. We'll call it Fireeats. Then we'll hit register app. This will download that Google services.json file. I believe it'll do it automatically, but I'll hit the button. And we'll need to import this into our project. So I'm going to go ahead and whip open Android Studio. And based on how much this screen thing is making my laptop lag, this will probably make my computer just absolutely crash. Once we're done, you can either close this or you can hit continue. There is a third step here that is actually adding the Firebase SDK. This has already been done in our sample app. So we don't have to add anything to our project Gradle files. It's already done in the boilerplate. But if you were building a real app, you'd actually want to go here and click, drop in your plugins and stuff like that. But our project's already set up for that. You'll see the new app has popped up. We have like built-in analytics, crash reporting, stuff like that already showing up. Obviously, we have no users yet, which is upsetting. I would expect a ton of users, but that's all right. And Android Studio is slowly booting up. It is worth noting everything we're going to do today you can easily do on a free tier of Firebase. The Firebase free tier is very generous, so you don't have to worry about putting in credit cards or anything like that. If you want to, you absolutely can, and that will go to the pay-as-you-go version of Cloud Firestore, but there's no reason to do that if you don't want to. Android Studio, let's open up our Friendly Eats Android project. Whilst it's loading, I'll pop open my downloads folder, go grab that Google services.json file. Downloads, Google services.json. Wait for this view to populate. Maybe not. Open. Friendly Eats Android, yes. So since Android Studio is being a little slow, I'll just go ahead and move this manually. The Google services.json file needs to go into Nope. Come on, computer. Just not having any luck with technology these days. Android Studio, into the project folder, and it goes in the app folder. So it should be right next to your app build.gradle, and you should be good. And man, this is being super, super slow. There's more in here than Gradle scripts. Man. All right, well, while my side pane is being a little bit of a pain, we will pull open that main activity.java and hop back over to our Firebase console. So once we get that Google services.json file into our application, we're pretty much done. The only other thing, oh man, project SDK is not defined.
Is it possible to digitalize?
Yeah, it's, that looks much better.
That's a image or is like a, oh, you mean the front? Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather have people be able to see now than see on video. So, remind me tomorrow. OK, there you go. All right. So in our Firebase project, go to the Authentication tab. And this is where if you were going to add Twitter auth, Facebook auth, all of those magical things, you would go in here and enable those. In this case, all we care about is email password authentication. If you wanted, wow, I know, everything is freaking fighting me today. If you want to enable all of those, you could. But for this application, as it's set up, we're only going to do email and password auth because that's the simplest. All the other ones require you to go and actually enable the specific provider, set up your OAuth app on them. Man. My computer is just dying. I apologize for all the technical issues today. This is just bad luck after bad luck. Yeah, please don't do that. OK, well, Grado invocation finished. That's good. OK, once this pops up, we'll see a list of providers. We can go ahead and go to the sign-in method tab. You probably won't have any users. I already have a couple because I was playing with it earlier. But if you go to sign-in method tab, in there will be email password, and we can make sure that is enabled. Just flip that little flag here, hit enable, hit save. And like I said, you have a bunch of other options here. You have phone auth. If you've ever used Twitter digits, that's the future. This is the future version of that. Google sign-in, Facebook, Twitter, all your favorite providers. At this point, we are pretty much done in the console. You actually don't need to do anything else for the rest of this project. We will keep it open to look at a few things, but you don't actually need it for anything. That's all the configuration we need to do. When you create your Cloud Firestore, so when you go here, go to Database, and you'll want it. There'll be a button here that says Try Cloud Firestore. When you hit View, it'll ask you, how do you want to enable this project? Do you want to enable it with locked security rules, or do you want to enable it in development mode? So those security rules restrict who can access your application. So in this case, I would go ahead and say enable it in developer mode. So that'll allow us to read the data without actually being authenticated. But it's up to you. You can actually go in and write these specific rules, which I think might actually be the same as the secured version. And I won't dig too much into security rules because we're already short on time. But the gist is, these rules are saying anyone who is authenticated, so if the request authentication doesn't equal no, they can read anything in our Cloud Firestore. You can go in and you can configure this, so like I can only read from my data, or I can only read things I'm flagged as an owner on. You have a whole bunch of power in that case, but we're not actually gonna deal with that too much, and it's a big topic. But if you're interested in it, we have a bunch of information in our documentation about securing your Cloud Firestore data using security rules. But just unlocked or these rules are perfectly okay for today. You'll see my rules over here have exactly that. So allow read-write if the user is authenticated at all. At this point, we could go ahead and run the app. I think I'm going to skip that for time and because my laptop is not being very nice and I don't want to risk it. But the important part is we need to go and hop into that main activity that everybody loves and get to writing some code. We're going to need to get an instance of Cloud Firestore, assign it to M Firestore, just like we always do. So we'll hop over here, go look at my main activity, hop down to right here, init Firestore, and paste that line in. So that'll just get us a reference to the Cloud Firestore server. And then we're going to have this method that allows us to fake some data. So the application we're building today is like a Yelp clone. We want to be able to filter and slice and dice a big list of restaurants. But if we were going to go and like make every restaurant by hand, we'd be like putting in fake restaurants for a really long time. So we got a bunch of fake data already in this application. And this method is just going to write to Cloud Firestore with a bunch of fake information so that we have restaurants to review and play with in our application. To do that, we're going to use a collection reference. And this is a pointer to basically a list of things in Cloud Firestore. If you're used to any NoSQL like collection, sub-collection, document type relation, this is exactly that. So a collection is a list of things. Those things are documents, and those documents contain actual data. So in this case, it's a collection called restaurants, which contains a list of restaurants. To do that, to actually write those, we'll be using our restaurant class, which is already implemented that we're not going to deal with. We'll get a random restaurant from restaurant util, and then we'll just call on that collection reference .add and write that reference to Cloud Firestore. So we'll go down here. We'll go to add random restaurants. On item, add items clicked. Replace that entire method, and we should be good. We'll have to import a couple things, as one does. Boom, boom, boom. And it should resolve that. Now, at this point, if we built out this app, we'd have an add random items button in the top of our app. I'm conflicted on if I should actually build this out or not. I probably should. It's just very, very sketchy at this point. So we'll save that. Everything's looking good. I'm going to go ahead and try to build this out, and we'll see.
No, maybe you can change the theme to white background.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty hard to see. It's settings right in here. Of course, that makes everything lag. There you go. It's a little more readable. This is just absolutely killing.
Maybe if you could include the font size.
Yeah, I'll do that as well. Hey, Vivian, could you go grab me my power cord? Thank you. It's in my yellow backpack. Yeah. All right. Sorry about this. Override, systems font. Will that apply to the editor? I can never remember. Apply, maybe. Oh. It makes everything bigger except what we really want. Where is the, somebody in here definitely knows this. Where is editor? Shift plus? That's Shift plus. Nope, none of those seem to work. View, yeah, then there's presentation mode. That'll work. Thank you. All right, there you go. There you go. We're getting this better. Okay. Yeah. I apologize. So for the due to the amount of technical issues we've had, I'm not going to actually try to build this. I'm pretty sure it'll cause my laptop to die because this is just not going well. But that's all right. So with this right now, we have the important part is the part we talked through where we're calling restaurants.add. So what restaurants.add does is that will just create a document in the collections restaurant with a unique ID. It's not anything we've set, but in the future we'll be able to go back and with that ID overwrite that specific document using set or update. But add is like appending to the list. So at this point, if you followed along, you can build out the app and click add random items. And what you'll see in your console is this list of data that looks like a collections called reference, a bunch of references, and in there we'll have things like a category, city, name, stuff like that, along with photo, everything you would expect like a restaurant listing to have. One important note is that although Cloud Firestore is real-time, just like the real-time database, so changes in your database will be reflected immediately in the console. It will not show new collections. So if you hit that button and you're expecting data to show up here, you'll have to refresh the page for the collection to actually show up. Next up, we need to actually pull this information back out of Cloud Firestore. We'll head back over to our init Firestore method, and we'll expand on that a little bit. And we'll dive into the new querying abilities of Cloud Firestore. Again, if you've ever looked at real-time database, you may be familiar with how limited the querying is. There's not that many options for ordering. There's not that many options for really slicing the data you have. So in this case, right out of the gate, we're going to be doing something that was hard to do in real-time database, which is get every document in that collection, so get everything in restaurants, and then order it by the average rating and descending, which is just an integer in there, and give us a limit. So in this case, I'm not sure what the limit is. I think it's maybe 50. So we're going to grab the 50 highest rated restaurants and print those out in the application. At that point, we'll go ahead and create a Firebase adapter, which is a recycler view, which is going to actually implement the view we'll have in the app, which will allow us to see all these restaurants pulling in. So let's go ahead and do these two steps. We'll go ahead and copy and paste this, our init Firestore method, go back up to init Firestore, and replace that entire one with our new method. And then, so this one's a little hard to copy and paste because we need to make sure we add this implementation line onto our recycler view, which is now in, I assume I can change files. Open, I'm not very familiar with the presenter view. Yeah, all right. I'm gonna give up actually trying to do this in Android Studio. This is just not working with me. So I'm just gonna explain this code, and we'll go with that. I apologize for the lack of real-time demo. So we're going to create a recycler view, and a recycler view is going to be really handy because it's going to work with another part of this, which is Firebase UI. And Firebase UI is a handy library that can make it really easy to render out UI components based on Firebase data. So we'll implement our recycler view, and we'll handle changes right here, which is we'll get back document snapshots from Cloud Firestore, which is going to be a bunch of changes. And this is a general theme with Cloud Firestore when you're listening for things changing. So for example, if the ordering of those restaurants, if their average ratings were changing, if the data themselves were changing, we would be able to use an on-snapshot listener, which gets back a list of changes. Those changes are corresponding to documents, and those will say things like the type of the change is that the document was added, the document was modified, or was moved. And this allows us to update our application intelligently. So we're not just saying, oh, this changed. We're actually getting information on what happened. So a new restaurant gets added, we can add that to a list. Something in the documents gets modified, we can re-render that specific document. So in order to actually handle those in our application, in our recycler view, we're going to have to implement each of those specific methods. So we're going to have an onDocumentAdded method, which will add to msnapshots at the index, so the current location as it is relative to our query. So we're not. So if something comes in with a high rating, we'll position it correctly relative to all the ratings in our recycler view, and then we'll actually pass the document that comes back from that change. In onDocumentModified, we'll check and see if there was a previous index, or if was this document already rendered but at a different location. And if that's the case, then we'll go and we'll move it. We'll go and we'll move it. But if it changed and it's actually in the same position, we will do that set and we will just call update. So it won't move it at all, but it'll re-render it. And then finally, if the document is removed, which might not be an actual remove, that might just be the item coming off of that query. So if it goes past item 50 in our query, if it becomes item 51 and it's no longer a result, we will get a document removed event. And so we'll have to remove it from snapshots and notify that the item was removed. Then we'll go back to our onEvent method and actually implement those. Our previous sample just had comments here, but we'll make sure to actually call onDocumentAdded when it's added, onDocumentModified when it's modified, and onDocumentRemoved when it is removed. Finally, we need to actually start listening, so we'll go in and we'll add in these couple of lines in the start listening method. At this point, if technology didn't hate me, we'd be able to go ahead and build this out. And what we'd have is a nice list of restaurants rendered in our application. If you're having any issues with this right now, make sure to check your logs and see if you see anything related to permission denied errors or anything like that. And if you see anything related to permission denied, go ahead and go over to your rules and make sure these are set to the default rules, which is going to need to be allow read write, just like that. Since we haven't implemented authentication yet, we won't be able to actually check that this works. So you'll have to set it just like that, and it'll give you this error. So if you either enabled Cloud Firestore in unlocked developer mode, or you manually went and set it here, you'll be good to test. At this point, we're going to dive into actually really using the cool querying capabilities of Firebase Cloud Firestore, because real-time database used to always have some filtering, but it was never good. You could never stack multiple filters. It wasn't very easy to say, give me, the cities where it is exactly equal to San Francisco, ordered by the average rating. That was just not a query that we supported. So with Cloud Firestore, we're going to implement this onFilter method, which is going to take a bunch of filters, and we'll go through and we'll stack them onto this query. So we'll create a base query. And this query is just a reference to that same restaurants collection we've been interacting with the whole time. Then if we have, for example, a city or a category set in this little filter dialog that pops up, we'll add that to the query. So the query becomes query.where equal to category is equal to that category that we specified, where city is equal to it. And we'll just do all of these. If they're enabled, we'll stack them on top of each other. And then at the very end, we'll do an order by. And this is what specifies the actual order of our documents coming back. And it is relevant to this sort by right here. So you'll have sort by rating or sort by number of reviews. And that is this last little sort here. We'll tack on a limit onto that same query. And then we'll actually finally pass that query over to our adapter that we created. So what we've done here is built a query that might have a bunch of filters on it. It might order by city and by location, or city and category, and order by a certain way, or it might not. If you haven't selected that, it'll just be that same base query that we started with from the beginning. From there, we'll do a little bit of extra housekeeping, but nothing Firestore specific there, so we won't deal with that at all. So if you go and run this right now and you pick a couple filters and you try to see what happens, you're going to get this interesting log in your logcats, which is basically going to say, hey, something happened. The query requires an index. You can create it, and it gets this big link. So although Cloud Firestore can do a bunch of really advanced querying, and we build you a bunch of indexes out of the box, if you're building an app like this where people are going to be filtering based on certain criteria, we can go ahead and create an index for that, which allows that filter to be much, much faster. So if it sees you doing that, if you're doing something where you're filtering by price and by city and ordering in a certain way, it's going to say, all right, you need to go ahead, take a step back. It'll still work, but it'll be slow. But it'll give you a link. And if you copy and paste this link, or you right-click on it in your console, and open up the link the error gives you, it'll take you to this really cool indexes page in Cloud Firestore. And it'll pop up and it'll say, all right, you're trying to add an index where you're sorting by the city in one way, you're sorting by the average rating in another way, and it'll just go ahead and create it for you. So if you're playing around and as you're developing, you're realizing you want these indexes created to be fast, that error right out of the gate just tells you what you need to do. So you can go in here and I can say, all right, I'm going to add an index for restaurants. I can never spell restaurants. Going to add a field, average rating, and it's going to be this. But that's really tedious. It's much, much easier to go ahead and just follow the link in the error. But you got to know to watch out for those. So if you ever feel like Cloud Firestore is being slow, or you feel like you're getting weird errors and you don't know why, look for this precondition failed from Cloud Firestore, because that's going to be what's going to get you these composite indexes and going to speed everything up. All right. The last thing we really need to talk about is sub-collections. So I mentioned that in Cloud Firestore, you have this collection, document, sub-collection schema. Basically what that means is that in real-time database, you would have some shape of data, you had a list of things, and you could just stack any JSON data that you might have ever interacted with under that, and it would be like one document. But in Cloud Firestore, I'm going to create this by hand, so I'll create an examples collection. And then under this, I'll create a new document with an auto ID. The field will just be hello, that'll be world. Because I don't have the actual app to show you, I have to do this by hand. But in your case, you'll be able to look at the restaurant's data. Now, under here, you'll see we have the field values. So this is the actual data that is relevant to this document. So that's restaurant name, average rating, stuff like that. But you also have this option to add a collection. So if we're dealing with restaurants, we're going to have a sub-collection called ratings. And under that, we can add another one. We can say, all right, the rating is 4.5, whatever. And now you'll see we step down. So now the current location is examples / that unique ID / ratings / another unique ID, which points to this explicit document. So each restaurant, or in my case, each example, is going to have a sub-collection of ratings. And this sub-collection can be queried, it can be manipulated just like any other collection in Cloud Firestore, but it's always tied to that parent document. So you have the option to go ahead and retrieve it based on the parent document. So I can say, all right, I know I'm looking at this restaurant, I want to pull the ratings for that restaurant as well. But the important part here is that it's all shallow. So if I retrieve a document, I don't necessarily get all the ratings stored under it. So the information is associated, but when I pull this down, I'm not getting all my ratings. It's an interesting distinction between Cloud Firestore and real-time database that you'll see. And this is kind of how we leverage restaurants, because we want to display a list of restaurants, but we don't want to display every single rating for every single restaurant. We don't want to load all that information. So if we just do a normal collection.restaurant and get a specific document, this ratings collection will be dropped off unless we explicitly say we want to request it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go down to the add rating method, and now at this point we're in the restaurant details activity.java file. And in here, we're going to do something more complex on that sub-collection. So we'll have a restaurants ref, which is a reference to a specific Cloud Firestore document. We'll step into a collection called ratings, and we'll create a new document under that. At that point, we'll run a transaction that allows us to add in a rating. And you can read through all this code. Basically, what we're doing is we're going and calculating a new average rating based on all of the ratings in that specific restaurant's rating list. We're doing that as a transaction so that if a bunch of ratings are coming in from different people manipulating ratings at the same time, they're not going to overwrite each other. The average rating will always be the most up-to-date rating because we're doing this in a transaction, which has all the nice atomic promises you would expect from a database transaction. At that point, we'll set back the restaurant to be the updated restaurant with the updated average rating, and we'll set the actual rating we've created to be in that ratings ref. Then we dive into security rules a little bit. I'm not going to cover this because we're out of time, But this is the gist of how you can go and lock down Cloud Firestore. In here we say you can only write ratings if you sign it with your UID. You can only create new ones. You can't delete old ones. You can't update old ones. Things like that. So this is how we lock down things for Cloud Firestore. But anywho, I apologize for how incredibly rough this has been. This has been a very difficult Codelab. So if you have questions, which I'm sure you did because we really had to rush through everything there, come back out to the Firebase table, which is just around the corner, and I'll be happy to talk to you more. But yeah, I hope you give it a shot and follow along. Sorry again for all the hard parts here.